I had spent my entire life working for the family business. While other kids were playing outside, I was sitting in my father's office, watching him handle contracts and deals. He used to say I had a natural talent for business, a sharp mind, and an instinct that even seasoned professionals lacked. For years, I did everything to prove him right. I worked harder than anyone else in the company. I was the first to arrive and the last to leave. I handled negotiations, managed finances, and solved problems no one else wanted to touch. I never asked for recognition. I just wanted to make my father proud. But my mother and brother? They never saw me as an equal. To them, I was just a helper, a secretary who happened to share their last name. My brother David had always been the golden child. He partied with clients, spent company money recklessly, and relied on his last name more than his actual skills. My mother, Margaret, turned a blind eye to everything, defending him no matter what. Still, I thought we were a family. I thought when the time came, we would run the business together, just as my father had always wanted. I was wrong. The day my father died, everything changed. The funeral had barely ended when they called for a family meeting. I sat across from them in my father's office, still mourning, still in shock. But their expressions were cold. There was no sadness in their eyes, only calculation. "We've been thinking," David said, leaning back in my father's chair as if he had been waiting for this moment his entire life. "It's time for some changes around here." I frowned. Changes? Margaret folded her hands neatly in her lap. "Your father built this company for the family, dear. And while we appreciate all the hard work you've put in," she paused, giving me that condescending smile she always used when she was about to deliver bad news. "We don't think this is the right place for you anymore." The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. I stared at them, waiting for the joke, for some sign that this was just a misunderstanding. "What are you talking about?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. David sighed dramatically, as if he were tired of explaining something obvious. "You've always been great at paperwork and organizing things, but running a company? That's a man's job." I felt my hands curl into fists under the table. "Are you serious? I've been running this company for years while you've been—" "Enough." Margaret's voice was sharp, final. "Your father's gone. The board has already agreed to transfer everything to David. It's what's best for the company." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad wouldn't want this. He— Margaret's eyes hardened. "Your father isn't here anymore. And as his wife, I have the final say." Just like that, I was erased. Years of loyalty, of dedication meant nothing. My own family had discarded me like I was nothing more than an inconvenience. They had already prepared everything. My name was removed from the official documents. My office was reassigned. My access to company accounts was revoked. The home I had grown up in, the one my father had left to the family, was no longer mine. I was given 1 hour to pack my things and leave. As I walked out of that building for what I thought was the last time, I felt something shift inside me. The shock, the betrayal, the heartbreak. It all hardened into something cold. Something sharp. They thought they had won. They thought I was weak. They thought I would disappear. They had no idea what was coming. I sat in my car outside the company building, gripping the steering wheel so tightly that my knuckles turned white. Everything I had worked for, everything I had sacrificed, was gone. Just like that. My own mother and brother had thrown me out like I was a stranger. No, worse. Like I was nothing. I kept expecting to wake up from this nightmare. To get a call from my father telling me this was all some terrible mistake. But my phone remained silent, except for the occasional email from HR. Official notices confirming my termination and the revocation of my company access. I had been erased. I didn't even realize I was crying until a tear slipped down my cheek. I quickly wiped it away. Number I wouldn't cry for them. I wouldn't give them the satisfaction of breaking me. But as I stared at the towering glass building that had once been my second home, the reality of my situation settled in. I had no job, no savings. Everything had been tied up in the company. My father had trusted them too much, believing they would do the right thing. I had no home either. The estate, the one place where I had always felt safe, had been taken from me in a matter of hours. I had spent my entire life preparing to run that company. I had no backup plan. And they knew it. I don't know how long I sat there, frozen in shock, before my phone buzzed with a new message. David, I hope you understand this is for the best. No hard feelings. I stared at the screen, my blood turning to ice. No hard feelings? I almost laughed. A second message popped up. David, you should move on. It's not like you were ever going to run the company anyway. That was it. That was the moment the shock wore off. The grief, the betrayal. It all boiled into something darker, something sharper. They thought I would disappear. They thought I would beg. They thought I would accept my fate. They were wrong. I wasn't going to move on. I wasn't going to walk away. I was going to take everything back. The next few days were a blur. I crashed at a friend's apartment, too humiliated to tell them the full story. I spent hours pacing, replaying everything in my head, trying to figure out where I had gone wrong. I had been too trusting, too naive. I had believed that family meant something, but business was never about family. It was about power. And I had just lost all of mine. I spent the first day drinking cheap whiskey and staring at my laptop, trying to figure out my next move. By the second day, I had sobered up enough to start digging. David had never been competent. I had covered for him too many times, fixing his mistakes, making sure he didn't ruin everything our father built. He had always been reckless, always too arrogant for his own good. And my mother, she had never cared about the company. She cared about money, about prestige. She wanted to keep the family name strong, but she never cared who actually did the work. They had taken everything from me, so I was going to take everything from them. I opened my laptop and started making a list. 1. Weaknesses. What were their vulnerabilities? David was impulsive and careless with money. My mother was obsessed with appearances. They both thought they were invincible. 2. Allies. Who still owed me favors? Who would be willing to help me bring them down? 3. Resources. What did I have left? Contacts. Industry knowledge. A reputation, though slightly bruised. I could work with that. 4. Leverage. The most important piece. What did they have to lose? I spent the rest of the night making calls, reconnecting with old clients, former employees, anyone who had ever been wronged by David's incompetence or my mother's arrogance. And there were plenty. By sunrise, I had a plan. I wasn't just going to ruin them. I was going to make them beg for mercy, and I wasn't going to give it. Revenge wasn't something that could be rushed. It had to be precise, calculated, like a game of chess where every move brought me closer to checkmate. I wasn't just going to make David and my mother suffer. I was going to make them destroy themselves. I started with research. David was a disaster waiting to happen. He was reckless with money, cutting deals with people he didn't understand, spending more than the company could afford. My mother, on the other hand, was obsessed with image. She wanted to be seen as the powerful matriarch of a thriving empire. She cared more about appearances than reality, and that was their weakness. I spent weeks gathering information, working in the shadows, reconnecting with people they had underestimated or discarded, employees who had been mistreated, business partners David had betrayed, investors who were starting to lose faith. I didn't ask for pity. I offered them something better, a way to turn their losses into an opportunity. I knew how the company worked better than anyone. I knew its strengths, but more importantly, I knew its weaknesses. And I was going to exploit every single one of them. I started small. A whisper here, a rumor there. Investors started hearing that David was making reckless financial decisions. Employees grew nervous about the stability of their jobs. Clients started considering other options. The cracks were forming. Next, I went after David directly. He had always been desperate to prove himself, to be seen as the rightful heir to my father's company. But he was also impatient, impulsive. He wanted fast success without the hard work, so I gave him exactly what he wanted. Through a few well-placed contacts, I created a fake investment opportunity, something too good for him to ignore. A chance to expand the company, to outshine our father's legacy. It was risky, but if it paid off, he would look like a genius, and if it failed, well, he'd take the blame. He never even hesitated. I watched from a distance as he poured millions into the deal, convinced he was making the smartest move of his life. But the moment the ink dried on the contracts, the truth came out. The investment was a scam. The money was gone. And David was the one responsible. Panic spread through the company like wildfire. Investors were furious. The board was questioning David's leadership. My mother tried to contain the damage, but even she couldn't ignore the financial hole he had just created. That's when I made my next move. I reached out to key shareholders, people who still respected my father's vision, who wanted someone competent in charge. I fed them just enough information to make them doubt David even more. His credibility was crumbling. And once people start losing faith in a leader, the fall happens fast. David, of course, was desperate to fix things. He tried to cover up the losses, moving money around, making risky deals to patch the hole. But he only made it worse. The more he struggled, the deeper he sank. I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. But then I remembered the smirk on his face when he told me to move on. So I kept going. By the time my mother realized what was happening, it was too late. The company was drowning, and investors wanted answers. The board held an emergency meeting. Whispers of David's incompetence turned into open conversations about removing him. That's when I made my final move. I walked into that boardroom like I had never left. Heads turned, eyes widened. Some of them looked guilty, others relieved. My mother's face went pale. David looked like he had seen a ghost. "What are you doing here?" he snapped. His voice was shaky. I smiled. "Fixing your mess?" The room fell silent. And just like that, the tables had turned. The silence in the boardroom was suffocating. David looked like he was about to lunge across the table and strangle me, while my mother sat frozen, her lips pressed into a thin, bloodless line. The rest of the board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, stealing glances at each other, unsure of what to say. I didn't wait for their approval. I took the seat at the head of the table. My seat. The one I should have had all along. "I believe we all understand the situation we're in," I said, my voice calm and controlled. "David's reckless decisions have cost this company millions. Investor confidence is at an all-time low. Clients are considering cutting ties. And if something isn't done soon, this company, my father's legacy, will collapse." David scoffed, trying to put on his usual arrogant act, but I could see the cracks forming. He was nervous. "You don't belong here," he spat. "You don't even work here anymore." I leaned forward, folding my hands on the table. That's funny, considering I just had a very interesting conversation with our major shareholders. I turned my gaze to the board members. "Did David tell you? The ones who have the power to call for a leadership vote?" A murmur spread through the room. That was the final crack I needed. "You little—" David shot up from his chair, but our mother reached out and grabbed his arm, forcing him to sit back down. I smiled. "Sit down, David. Throwing a tantrum won't change the numbers." One of the older board members cleared his throat. "What exactly are you proposing, Miss Carter?" I had them. I pulled out a folder and slid it across the table. A plan. A way to stabilize the company, regain investor trust, and undo the damage that's been done. But it can't happen with David in charge. My mother finally spoke. "You're being ridiculous." Her voice was sharp, but there was an edge of desperation beneath it. "The company is already handling this. We don't need you." I met her gaze and let the silence stretch. Then I pulled out a second folder. This is the report I sent to my father 6 months ago. It details the financial risks David was taking and the potential consequences if they weren't addressed. I turned to the board. He ignored it, and now you're all paying for that mistake. The board members exchanged glances. Some of them nodded, their expressions grim. This isn't about revenge, I continued, keeping my tone steady. It's about saving this company, and you all have a choice to make. The vote was swift. David was out. My mother tried to fight it, of course. She made a last-minute plea, insisting that David just needed time, that I was manipulating the situation, but the numbers didn't lie. Investors didn't trust him. Clients were already backing away. When the final vote was cast, the verdict was clear. David was officially removed as CEO, and I was reinstated. As the meeting ended, the board members shook my hand, offering cautious smiles and words of encouragement. They weren't loyal to me yet, but they were willing to give me a chance. That was enough. David stormed out of the room without another word. My mother lingered, watching me with narrowed eyes. "This isn't over," she murmured. I smiled. "Oh, Mother, it was over the second you underestimated me." She left without another word. I stood in my father's old office later that night, looking out over the city skyline. It felt strange being back. The last time I had stood in this room, I had been thrown out like garbage. Now it was mine. I had won. But I wasn't finished yet. David and my mother had taken everything from me once. They had expected me to disappear, to accept my fate. They wouldn't make that mistake again, because I was just getting started. Victory tasted sweet, but I knew better than to let my guard down. David and my mother weren't the type to accept defeat gracefully. They would try to claw their way back, find some desperate loophole, manipulate someone on the board, spread lies to the media. I couldn't let that happen. So, while they were still reeling from the blow, I struck again. The first step was ensuring David never had a chance to rebuild his influence. I had already planted the seeds. His reckless spending, the fraudulent investment, the loss of investor trust. But I needed to make sure the damage was permanent. I leaked the details of his financial mismanagement to the press. Not all at once. Just enough to raise questions, to keep the story alive. Articles popped up about the disgraced CEO who had nearly tanked his father's company. Investors distanced themselves even further. His reputation was in shambles. Then came the legal side of things. With the help of the company's legal team, I initiated an internal audit of all financial transactions under David's leadership. Unsurprisingly, we found discrepancies, misuse of company funds, shady deals, even a few borderline illegal transactions. I didn't have to do much. The auditors took care of the rest. By the end of the month, David wasn't just out of the company. He was under investigation. I wondered if he realized yet that this wasn't just karma. This was me. My mother was harder to deal with. She had always been careful, always kept her hands clean while letting others do the dirty work. She hadn't left a trail of financial crimes like David, but she had her own weaknesses. Her reputation. For years, she had built the image of a powerful, respected businesswoman. People saw her as the mastermind behind the company's success, the force holding everything together after my father's passing. I dismantled that illusion piece by piece. Board members began to question her judgment. Why had she defended David for so long? Why hadn't she acted sooner? Some of them suspected she had known about his reckless decisions and had covered for him. And I let them believe it. I never said it outright. I just asked the right questions at the right time, planted just enough doubt. Her influence crumbled faster than I expected. Investors stopped returning her calls. People who had once sought her approval started avoiding her. She wasn't seen as a leader anymore, just another enabler of failure. The final blow came when the board officially removed her from any remaining advisory roles. She was out. Powerless. For the first time in my life, I saw fear in her eyes. With them both gone, I could finally breathe. I had control of the company. My father's legacy was safe, but I had changed. This wasn't just about taking back what was mine. Somewhere along the way, I had stopped playing defense and started enjoying the game itself. The strategy, the planning, the way every move shaped the future. I had spent my entire life being underestimated. Now, people knew better. One evening, I sat in my office, watching the city lights flicker outside the window. A familiar name flashed on my phone screen, an investor who had previously ignored me, now eager to schedule a meeting. I smiled. Revenge was complete. But this was just the beginning. I wasn't just here to take back my father's company. I was here to build my own empire. And nothing was going to stop me. Have you ever experienced something similar? Share your thoughts. Subscribe now and never miss a story that will leave you speechless.